Hello again from the Register. This morning we're talking about IT management and how to get into shape for tomorrow. Basically how to get your act together. Well, that's not, the act isn't the word that Martin used when we were talking about it earlier, but let's pretend it was. Now, it was Einstein that said, technological progress is like an axe in the hands of a pathological criminal. So with us today, we have someone from the company that has perhaps made more axes than any other company. From Microsoft, we have Naresh. Welcome.
Thank you, Tim, for that great introduction.
First time in the studio, I owe it to you. It's roomier than it looks on the tiny television.
Certainly is.
Yes, and also from Freeform Dynamics, the man who's going to teach us how to swing that axe is Martin Atherton. Martin, welcome back.
Thank you. Hi, Tim.
Yeah, you're welcome. And now, before we get going, tell you about the interface. You know all this already, so maybe you'd like to sing along. So there's the tab to ask questions. Please ask as many questions as you want, and put your name on the questions. It's nice. It's more personal in that way. There's our bios. There you can download the presentation, look at it again later, take it home, maybe even scroll through it on your smartphone. And there's also the feedback tab for afterwards. It's election day here in the UK, so imagine that this is our own little election for the country of Register, and I'm the minister of webcasts, or something like that anyway. So moving on, Martin, why do we need to get our act together?
We need to get our act together because there's a whole bunch of things that are happening around us, that are about to happen, that are on the horizon, whether we're talking about raised expectations of IT from the business and therefore the implications of that, whether we're talking about doing as much as possible with a budget that's maybe shrinking slightly or is static or is just simply being looked at and scrutinised a hell of a lot more in the past. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff that, from a sort of a technology point of view, that's been kind of swimming around the periphery for quite some time now. A lot of it's a lot more mature, a lot more accessible, a lot more affordable. And to sum it all up, there's a very strong sort of requirement to get our act together around the way we manage IT going forwards, so that we can carry on doing the things we want to do and, dare I say, actually make them a little bit better as well.
And my other question around this is, hasn't this always been the case?
Yes, absolutely. That is probably well worth pointing out. This is a sort of a moving target. It's a continuum. It's not a stop-start thing. We could have the same type of conversation 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It just so happens that the context we're having it in and some of the things that some of the choices that we're faced with are different than they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Why have you got me in the studio talking about it today?
Why have I got you in the studio talking about it? Why today? Well, why not? But like I said, there's a whole bunch of things, mainly around the concept of service, right? And this is an elevated expectation of how we manage things from the point of view of the people using them. And that has some quite interesting implications of how we manage IT, which is different from how we manage it today and how we've sort of assembled all the things that we have to manage IT in the past. But we'll get to that.
Great, let's get to it.
So, a bit of background. Now, I was hoping that this webcast might actually serve as a bit of a timeout for some busy IT guys that don't actually get much opportunity to just sit back for an hour, whatever, and actually sort of survey the wood and the trees and actually try and separate them out a bit. And we actually got a really simple goal and premise for this webcast today, probably the simplest one we've ever had in terms of why we're here and talking about it, and that's just to work up to talking about a way of getting a bit of sensible process involved in helping us work out what the right adjustments are that IT might want to take and then taking them. Now, the word process is perhaps a bit of a dirty one in terms of, it could be big consultants, big project, big initiative, all that kind of stuff. But hopefully in the next sort of hour or so, we'll see that what we're talking about is really simple. And we're going to be hearing from Naresh in terms of how these guys bring a bit of formality to proceedings, because often the case that, we can talk about things that we could all do if we had the time. Sometimes we might need a bit of sort of external influence or external inspiration just to sort of set us going. But what we're going to end up talking about is actually, if you like, no big deal in terms of what we're sort of suggesting that people maybe step back and take a look at and think about doing.
So just to introduce you, Naresh, you do this in real life for people, don't you?
I do indeed. So I guess my focus is really working with customers on a day-to-day basis to really help them get the best out of their investment in technology, but really focusing on that people and process side. So, Martin's talked about how we can take a step back and think about where we want to get to. That's really the focus I play with customers to let's understand where you are currently, where you want to be over the next sort of 12 to 16 months. More importantly, what the steps you need to take to get you there.
Now, if you came into me and I was a customer and you said to me, you need a process, I would say to you, I've got one already, thanks.
Yeah.
So that's not what people say to you?
Quite often. And I guess, obviously, coming from Microsoft, first thing that customers do say to me is that, well, why are Microsoft, a technical company, coming to me to talk about process? And really, this is, taken back from the journey we've had to take internally. Obviously, we've got some fantastic technologies that we give to our customers, but at the same time, we've experienced pain. And it's really because of the people and process side of things. And it's really sort of taking on board the journey we've taken and trying to give that sort of advice to our customers.
So you haven't quite got this one sorted out internally yourselves yet?
It's ongoing. It's forming a base of continuous service improvement. We've certainly improved, and we're continuing to improve.
That's another good answer to the question you said, why are we talking about it now? It'll just be relevant to talk about it in 6 months' time, in 12 months' time, and we will be, perhaps with slightly different things up our sleeves to help us. We were talking out there about not getting ahead of ourselves. So I just want to put a bit of context, a very little bit of context in place. So this is the second webcast in a series of webcasts that we're doing as part of a workshop that is around, or the topic is evolution of the data center. And we've already looked at architecture. The articles that are up there that the Reg readers are interacting with us and leaving their comments on at the moment are around management, which is an area we'll be talking about today. We'll be looking at information management in the near future and where it's all going and all that sort of stuff. We've already looked at a particular theme around architecture, and that was around high availability. So there's a hell of a lot more content to come that the readers can hopefully engage with and talk to us about what they're doing in those areas. But we're going to talk briefly today about, like I said, a bit of context, how we got to where we are, because I think that's quite important to just acknowledge it. And it's based on a whole bunch of work that we've done with the Reg readers, some of which they're going to be familiar with anyway. And then sort of put a stake in the ground and say, well, actually, we know roughly where it's all going. And one of your observations when we were talking last week was that, generally speaking, it's not as though IT doesn't know where it's all going. It's a case of finding the space to actually work out how to get there. So that's what we're going to be sort of talking about.
And we're going to get some decent examples for people so they know what they're actually going to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try and give my real-world experience wherever possible. And obviously, like I said, I'm working with customers on a day-to-day basis to give sort of some real-life examples.
OK, great.
OK, 30 seconds on where we are today. The historical approach to IT management has sort of followed the historical approach to IT investment, as in, let's have one of these, let's have one of these, let's have something that does this, let's have this other thing that does this. It does a bit of the same of that, but never mind, it's better, and so on and so on. You have this sort of silo and sort of layering effect, and with that comes the requirement to sort of manage them. And, OK, we'll have a bit of stuff to manage this, a bit of stuff to manage this, a bit of stuff to manage this. Now, we've got lots of silos, and somebody once said, what's wrong with silos? At least they work. And absolutely right, they do.
That's what we were saying last week, actually.
Yeah, indeed. And that is the case. But when we start to sort of think about, actually, what we want to do is manage this thing, which is made up of a bunch of components, from the point of view of the guy that's using it, because that's the point. We actually need to be able to stick these silos together and look at them from the point of view of the result, as opposed to the underlying components. So there is a change in emphasis in terms of what or how we're trying to manage things. But it's quite difficult to get from where we are now, which is a lot of quite sort of deep and granular capabilities, to wrap it all up into something that makes sense from that sort of user experience point of view. And we've done a whole bunch of research with the Reg audience around this. It was with the Systems Centre guys a couple of years ago at Microsoft. And the acknowledgement was that this whole IT management thing, it does what it does. It's OK, thanks. Nobody hates IT, really. It's not broken. People aren't running around with the pants on fire and all that kind of stuff. But the acknowledgement is it could be better. And there's a great slide which I have spared us today, because everyone's seen it a lot of times. And we came up with a list of about 20 things, and it included sort of help desk and problems with users and data and security and change and configuration management, and the big list of things that IT does on a day-to-day basis. And we asked the Reg guys to say, right, of these 20 things, which one of them causes you the headaches, and score it on a 1 to 5 sort of thing. And most of them had quite big scores. And you think, well, OK, that one's like, well, in isolation, that's no big deal. From the business's point of view, it's like, well, that's what IT does. And then we thought, well, hang on a minute, how many people told us that all these things, or 10 of these things, were a headache? And it turns out that it was most of them. So we're starting from this point of view where we've got all these capabilities, and we manage this, we manage that, we manage that, but it's not actually it's not helping us sort of move forwards. It's almost a bit of a status quo. And we actually need to do something to sort of break that and say, right, OK, there's all this new stuff around the corner, which I'll get to talking about in a minute, and we need to sort of perhaps reassess or revisit the way that we actually manage our stuff. And this isn't anyone's fault. It's just where we've got to. And we found out that even organisations that try to sort of take a more joined-up approach to IT management by investing in the so-called suites of systems management
That's
products.
usually where we get to over about now is someone says buy some more software. Yeah.
They're not actually in any better position than the guys that didn't buy suites and the guys that did go out and bought a bit of management for this, a bit of this, a bit of this. And we've measured this. And the correlation between we've got it all joined up, thanks, on paper or on PowerPoint, and the ones that haven't, there's very little difference. And that's sort of interesting, scary, etc., etc. But you can see how it's happened, because even the systems management vendors, they've pulled their stuff together over 10, 20 years, and it's made up of a bit of this and a bit of that. And, you know, on the top, it's all nicely, evenly branded and all the rest of it. But underneath, it's an acquisition here and a merger here and all that kind of stuff. So it's sort of inevitable. But it's not really anyone's fault, because there wasn't really any other way of doing it. So that's kind of, if you like, the sort of level setting. And that's been sort of acknowledged. It's not like we're making this up. In terms of where we're going, like I said, it asks us to take a slightly different, or put a slightly different emphasis on how we manage our stuff. And the overarching sort of theme that sums all this up is service centricity. Now, a lot of people say, oh, we don't think about things in terms of services and all that stuff. But when you actually talk about what they do and how they do it, actually they do. They don't have to call it services. That's just sort of semantics, really. But the point is that the user is becoming a focal point. Expectations are raised from users, from the businesses, from groups, all that kind of stuff. And as I mentioned briefly earlier, there are a bunch of emerging technologies and trends that are actually within reach, whether it's getting sort of down and dirty with virtualization, which we spent a lot of time talking with the register audience about, whether it's about looking, dare I say, to the cloud. And all I mean by that is that we've got a much broader range of choices in terms of where we procure and source services from. But that the story doesn't end there. There's sort of, you know, there can be new lines of services into the business, but somebody's got to take hold of them, make sense of them, wrap things around them like processes and workflows, and actually make them work for the business. Otherwise, all you're doing is just adding more and more silos.
So, Naresh, on this one, what's the justification, the immediate justification of getting people to give you attention on this? Are you telling them that they're going to save time? Are they saving money? What's the, you know, because people are, if you have 10 minor problems already, it's hard to clear space in your diary to get into this.
Sure. If anything, it's what are the implications if you don't make time to redress those problems? And sort of what we say to our customers is that, you know, where are you moving to over the next 16 months, and have you got a clear plan? Now, a lot of customers do say to us that, yeah, we have a clear idea as to where we are going to get to, but we're not too clear as to who needs to be involved in that process, what that journey is going to look like. Now, you've talked about how customers document a number of problems. I would certainly ask that for our customers before I do any piece of work, is ask for two sort of bits of information. Is really, what are your organisational goals? What are your core IT objectives? And sort of document a number of pain points. And I guess typically anything between 5 and 7 pain points that we can really look at and try to address over 3 days of planning as to what can we do about those pain points? Is it really achievable? And what are the sort of timescales behind that?
Because there's no real justification for doing this in the short term. It's hard to get the sign-off for doing this if you can't solve some immediate problems very quickly.
Well, that's what we're actually going to demonstrate, that it is possible to do that. We're not trying to turn this into a big deal, a big corporate initiative. And to steal a phrase that I think John Collins came up with, IT is about doing the right things well and perhaps doing less of the wrong stuff. But unless you can sit down and work out what the things are that you need to be doing well, and let's do less of the bad stuff, you know, it's less about doing lots more new things necessarily. And you almost need a way of separating the wheat from the chaff. And that's where we're going to get to. So in terms of where it's all going, it's reasonably well sort of acknowledged and understood that, you know, the cool stuff that we're sort of evolving towards is over there, and the problem is not what it is, it's what are the steps and how to get there, and the things that we should do versus the things that we maybe should stop doing or do less of. And there's one absolute sort of critical point that we were talking about the other day that we will come back to, but unless you've got some support from the next levels above to actually make some changes, you might as well just forget it from the start, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I've been doing these sorts of workshops now for coming up to 2 years, and I've been with customers who have put in place fantastic roadmaps. I've worked with the IT guys and the ops teams and said, we can really go ahead and do this, but it's failed to materialise purely on the fact that we haven't had that senior buy-in. And it's almost demoralising from a customer standpoint, but also demoralising from my point of view is that we've really worked together for 3 days to put in place a fantastic plan, but not to actually realise that's not going to happen anymore.
Right, yeah. I mean, that might be actually something, if you've had experience of this, let us know what your experience is. And if you've got a frustration, if you're stuck in this, let us know about that as well. Because maybe Naresh will help you get unstuck. Or Martin, actually. I'm not saying you can't.
We're talking about getting a map, basically.
Yeah.
And let's face it, if you can't get support for working out where to go, it's unlikely you're going to get support for setting off and actually doing stuff. So this is sort of, it's fundamental stuff on paper, but as we're going to talk about, it's not necessarily just the easiest thing. Hey, can we have some support for this? Yeah, of course. What is it? So there we go. So we're really talking about sort of getting a map, and this is where sort of Naresh is going to start talking about some of the experiences that he's had with his customers. But getting to, if you like, the start grid, getting prepared to do something involves that slightly sort of cheesy phrase of IT business alignment.
It's our old friend business IT alignment, isn't it?
It is, and it boils down to mutual understanding of requirements and just using that to drive activity. Now, if you've actually got a way of sort of managing that process, you can start talking about governance and really sort of highfalutin things like that. But we're not going to go as far as that. But the point is, we can make these sort of like big sounding things really sort of practical and sensible and pragmatic and things that you can take hold of and actually do things with. So does the question, do we actually know at this point in time, given what's out there in terms of the world of business and the pressures that are on our company in particular, because that's going to be slightly different from the guy next door and all the rest of it, what is it they actually need at the moment or don't have or would really like?
But Martin, you've worked in a business, you know that what the business wants is IT to go away and do its job.
Yeah, absolutely, and it makes it even worse when you've got sort of little pressure, well, not little pressures, but you've got evolving sort of things like consumerisation of IT, and the chief exec brings his Mac in one day and says, hey, I've got this new shiny thing, and everyone else wants one, and all of a sudden it's like the expectation is that this will be managed as part of everything else that's managed, and so on and so on and so on, and I want my iPhone, and I want my BlackBerry, and I don't want the thing that you said we're all going to use, and that extends now to all the free software apps that are out there, or all the free communications tools and widgets that are out there, and all of a sudden, or at least over a period of time, if you're not on top of this, either to sort of control it or harness it, and that sort of depends whether it just depends how you sort of view IT. It's either seen as necessarily as a threat, perhaps, in terms of order and versus chaos, or perhaps as something that, if you have people championing these things, there's actually some good stuff you can get out of them. But the point is, you need to know what's going on. And like I said, the business is easily distracted by all this new shiny stuff. And I think one of the challenges that if IT isn't able to articulate what it's offering today and what the business can get from it, then how on earth can the business sort of appreciate that and say, well, actually, that's great. We might need a bit less of this and a bit more of this, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that mutual understanding is kind of critical, right? And, well, it's what we were talking about the other day.
It is, and it's almost, go back to your point, Tim, around IT needs to go away and do its job. Well, IT does need a bit of direction as to where is the business going. Now, from an IT point of view, they first of all need to get their house in order to really think about what is it that we are providing currently. And how can we articulate that to the business in a language they will understand? There's no point in them, telling the business that they are providing deep diving technologies that the business is not going to understand. How is that going to make them money? What's their return on investment? What are we getting from this piece of latest? What are we going to get from MacBooks or iPhones?
So, from your experience, give me an example of something that works, a way of expressing this that works.
Yeah, okay, so if I go back to the whole analogy of, if I put my process hat on and think about how is IT showing value or demonstrating to the business what they provide, it goes back to a sort of a catalogue of services. Now, if I talk about a service catalogue that demonstrates all the services that IT are providing, Now, there is a journey that our customer or IT needs to take before they can sort of put in place what I call a service catalogue. They need to understand everything that's in their environment and everything that makes up their services. Now, we do lots of work with customers to what we call service mapping, where we sort of take a service. As an example, we may take a service called like messaging, and we would map out all the critical components that would make up that service. And we would map out, say, the hardware, the applications, the discrete types of configuration settings, the supporting services that ensure that service stays available. So that's one part of that journey. The next part is to really understand who's involved in that service, who owns all those components. If I now understand what those components look like, I can start to stipulate that into the service catalogue as to, this is my service, this is who are involved in that service. And from an IT point of view, they can give clear targets to the level of service they can provide because they know who's involved in that process.
Are companies tending to do this already just because of the problems of providing these services?
I think so, ever more so. I mean, I've been, over the last sort of 3-4 months, I've been working heavily with NHS. And it really is going back to Martin's example that the business get excited by shiny new toys and they see the latest gadgets and they want to have it in their environment. How do IT control that? First of all, for them to control that, it needs to go away and understand what they're providing. And by doing like a piece like service mapping and then putting that in place and formalising that into a service catalogue, you can start to control what the business goes out and purchases.
You're a brave man to get involved with NHS IT. I imagine you probably said the wrong thing to someone at some point. But no, I mean, seriously though, even in something like this, the idea of these sort of shiny toys, this is still a problem.
Absolutely. I see it, regardless of whatever customer or whatever sector I work in, controlling what the business go out and do is very, very difficult. And to be honest, will it ever stop? Can you ever put a control on it? Not entirely, but you can try and control it in some aspects.
Well, you can certainly benefit from it. I mean, there are going to be certain overheads, but like I said, it's a glass half empty, half full thing. Some of the things that are emerging that will come from the users might actually be better than what's already there. So that sort of, if you like, drawing a line in the sand where IT completely understands what its current capabilities are, and looking at the gap between what it offers, what it would like to offer, what the business would like it to offer, and then sort of putting a sort of a sensible filter on that, because the business guys might want hover cars and transporters and all the rest of it, and IT says, well, we could probably do you a better CRM system, or that will join up these guys so that we can provide better customer service. So it's about introducing a bit of reality into the equation, but that stems from IT really understanding what it's already got and what its capabilities are, and then there's a discussion about any gaps or any things that might need to be addressed or adjusted or changed or added or even removed, and that sort of gets us on to what we were talking about, which you can sort of sum up with maturity, and this is either a really useful thing or something that gets people's backs up, because nobody really wants to be immature, right? Now, you've got a great example of this in a minute, which hopefully will make people go, OK, fair enough, I can work with that, given what I've just heard about Microsoft. But like I said, we've had a bit of a B&R bonnet about these sorts of models, and it's all right if you're a sales guy and on level 1, 2, 3 and 4, typically you'd have bought this and this from us. The real world is that any company is going to be great at some things, and super mature at some things, and perhaps immature at others, and that's just the way it is. It may be a function of the last set of investments that you made, etc., etc. So we're really great at, customer service management. We're really rubbish at being compliant around data protection, whatever. That's just the way it is. So these things are not linear. However, they do provide a reasonably good starting point for a discussion, and that's about as sort of, if you like, the sensible baseline from which to start a conversation about where we might go and the things that might help us.
Yeah, and just to pick up on that, obviously, the strategy work that I do with customers, obviously, we talked previously around, I capture their IT objectives, I talk about their pain points. One thing we also look at is their current maturity, and we focus on our maturity model, and that's the infrastructure optimization model, where we would get the customer to complete a questionnaire that would assess how mature they are in our maturity model. Now, there are sort of 4 stages of maturity: basic, standardised, rationalised and dynamic. As Martin already mentioned, no customer likes to be told they're immature. And really, part of that whole strategy discussion over 3 days is to really work out, first of all, this is where you are in the model. let's really work out what's right for your organisation to move to. And on that, as Microsoft, we've made a business decision never to be the dynamic stage of maturity.
Why wouldn't you want to be as mature as possible?
Well, based on the fact that our business goals require us to beta test all our products in a live environment. So, from a dynamic point of view, from a security good practice, that doesn't meet that model. But we've made a business decision to say, before we release our products to our customers, we need to be testing it in-house. So I've been running Office 2010 on my machine for a number of months now. I've had Windows 7 on my machine for a number of months before we went RTM. So it's all about giving the product group feedback. And that's, again, putting it into a customer environment, working out, well, you may have four stages of maturity, and often I get a response that we want to be dynamic, but really, what's right for you to move to? Because sometimes it might not be a real requirement.
So the most is not always the thing to go for?
Well, yeah, you've got to go back and look at what the organisation requires from you. What are the business goals?
Think of like a bank or something. So that's a really easy example.
Yeah.
There are obviously a whole bunch of compliance mandates that they've got to at least demonstrate that they're able to meet, but hopefully actually meet under the covers as well, whether it's sort of access, data, security, or all that good stuff. You would want to be in the, if you like, the top right-hand side of whatever the scale is for those particular capabilities. But if I'm a retailer or somebody that doesn't have perhaps a lot of risk or any sort of personal data, right, retailer's a bad example, in my business, then I don't need to be the best in my industry or amongst my peers at that particular thing. So this is about context.
OK, I'm not very good at concepts. Can you explain to me the difference between these top two levels then? The rational, is it?
So there are 4 stages of maturity.
4 stages.
So you've got your basic, standardised, rational and dynamic. So I guess if I to generalise the 4 stages of maturity, you obviously say you're sitting in basic, you've seen sort of a cost centre. You're sort of seen as having uncoordinated processes, very little automation of technologies. So you work through the maturity, so standardised, you start to gain a bit more control of your environment, whereas you go through to rationalised, you're seen as a business enabler, and sort of a dynamic stage where you're the sort of strategic asset. Now, when we assess our customers, elements of what they do may be sitting in dynamic or rationalised or basic and standardised. But we do say to our customers that if you want to move to the next level of maturity, you need to meet all the criteria. So if you've got parts of, say, 15% sitting in rationalised and 70% sitting in dynamic, you've got to meet all the criteria in basic before you've been classed as standardised or rationalised.
I think I'm with you, yeah.
Okay.
When you meet sort of companies, what sort of proportion end up down at the basic level and the standardised level?
It's surprising. I mean, obviously, when I have the conversation with customers, before I show them results, I ask them, where do you think our customers are currently? And that's really taken from a worldwide view. And, their responses vary. So, I think most of us are sitting in rationalised or dynamic. But the honest truth is that, based on when customers initially do the assessment, whether it's through the strategy work I do or through online completion, almost 64% of our customers are sitting in basic.
Ooh.
Let's be really clear about what this means, right? This is not about your business is rubbish, it doesn't work properly. It's about the efficiency and effectiveness of the exploitation of technology in order to help you do stuff. All right, so you can have, and indeed we do, but based on what you've just said, Naresh, the majority of the Fortune 1000 or the Global 500 or whatever are hovering around sort of basic and standard. And that means there's a certain amount of overhead that they have to get through to use the stuff they do to do their business. And in spite of that, they're still the biggest and most successful companies in the world. It could be slicker. They could spend less money on IT, or they could spend the same amount of money and get a lot more out of it. So it's not about being a crap business. It's about how you harness technology and how efficient and sort of effective it is. So we want to be really clear on that.
Let us know, actually, yes, because right away now, let us know where you think you are. If less than 64% of you say that you're down in the basic, we know that you're lying. So it's basic,
Standardised,
rationalised, and dynamic. Dynamic's the best one, and basic's the worst one. Just let us know. We've got a sort of couple of questions asking about specific models. I know we're going to get onto that, so I want to give you time to do it. But also on this slide, I notice that a lot of the things, that these common areas for attention, these aren't big strategic things. patch management?
Exactly. This is why at the start we said we are loosely talking about a very simple process to help us illuminate some of the areas that we might need to address to give us a bit of breathing space to start looking at all the cool stuff which is over there. And what this maturity discussion lets you do is hopefully not depress you, but let you focus on the right things. Now, you don't necessarily have to look at your entire IT infrastructure from this point of view. You might choose, based on your conversations that you've just had with the business, a couple of particular processes or services which support a couple of particular processes. So if you're, a mobile phone retailer, it might be about on-ramping customers or reducing customer churn or sending data from here to there if that's what do you know what I mean? So this can be quite specific. This does not have to involve your entire data center, but in fact you're going to get more value from being a little bit more specific than that. But this is the whole point of putting this kind of loose process in place, or a formal one if you get external guys to help you, is that it's about focusing on the right things.
Absolutely. It's really sort of, the end goal is to give you guys focus, give customers focus to, OK, this is where our maturity is. Let's not get too downhearted about where the fact we may be sitting in an area of maturity that we didn't think we were going to be when we first embarked on that assessment, but really, let's focus on what we need to address. Is it patch management? And what is it around patch management we need to improve? We always say to our customers that, typically that type of assessment, always conduct it every 6 to 12 months because your infrastructure is constantly changing. And it's just making sure that you're focusing on the areas that the business is really going to receive value from.
Yeah. I was just distracted for a second because Andy's just sent in a message to say, can we get the definition of those maturity levels on a slide? Well, you can't actually, Andy, because we don't have a slide with those on it. But is there somewhere where he can find out a little bit more?
So, go to the Microsoft website and type in infrastructure optimization, and it will take you to our site.
Infrastructure optimization, and you'll get those 4 levels spelt out for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, do it. Don't do it now, because we've got a webcast going on. Do it later, Andy. It'll still be, the problem still needs to be solved in half an hour's time. OK, sorry. Now, we were talking, so we were talking about these really basic things. We're building up from these really quite basic levels. But there's still quite a lot of work in that. The problem that I can see is maybe you'll just get bogged down in solving small problems again, and we'll never get to the whole point of this.
So, as part of the role that I do, obviously, part of it is looking at the customer maturity. But my focus is really looking at those pain points that the customer's documented to me. Now, I know that if we put some real focus to addressing those pain points, that's obviously going to have an impact on their maturity. So throughout my whole discussion over 3 days and working with the customer to understand where they want to get to, it's really, OK, if we address these pain points, how does that impact your maturity? If you're saying to me that you want to move to standardised in the model, how is it that what we're about to address in this pain point is going to allow you to do that?
Mm-hmm. And let's be dead clear, it goes back to that list of 20 things that we asked the reg readers, which of these things caused you headaches? Oh, it's all of them. These are not little things. These are things that these guys do on an ongoing basis, and there's a lot of overhead and a lot of effort involved. And if you step back, or if you're in business and you never really thought about IT, it's like, well, that's what they do, isn't it? And actually, if you're sort of trying to think of a motor engine analogy or something, but you want to be driving your car. You don't want to spend your time putting oil in it and tightening things up and all that kind of stuff, because then you never get to enjoy the car, right, in terms of what it's capable of. And these things, like I said, individually may just be like, oh, it's just patch management. Oh, it's just the fact that we've got 100 monitoring tools, and wouldn't it be nice to have less, and et cetera, et cetera. These are doing IT has become managing the overhead of doing IT, and that's not what it was designed to do. And the people that are there were not really employed to sort of, do that. They were there to sort of help the business get the most out of it and not be sort of tinkering around with it and playing around under the hood sort of thing. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Just a quick, I think you hit on the one motor analogy that hasn't been used in IT yet. So that's it. They're all gone now.
That's good.
Just a quick extra question coming on. Some of these things are, you can and you're talking to people for 3 days.
Yeah.
And some of these things can be changes that can be quickly put through. Are we talking about processes that go for 6 or 12 months? Are we talking about, the changes that goes through sort of 24 months? What sort of project are we talking about?
So I aim to put a roadmap that spans anything between 12 to 16 months, and that's really something that the customer can go away and really achieve. We can sometimes put in place a 5-year roadmap, but really it's how we
Trouble with the 5-year roadmap is 2 years down the line, you need a different roadmap.
Absolutely. It's almost as if it needs to be constantly reviewed, and how can we get some initial quick wins in that roadmap? And that's really how it keeps customers on that journey to health.
Because you need some things that you're going to be able to do in the first month.
Absolutely, because you've got to show value. You've got your exec sponsor saying, we're going to give you the sign-off to go away and do this. How can I show some immediate value to my sponsors?
And traditionally, in your experience, it's been some of the things like we had on the last slide, that things like sort of patch management, change management improvements.
Yeah, obviously, patch management, change management, very, very broad terms. I mean, it's just really working out what the focus around patch management is. What around change management do we need to address? Do we need to make the process more slicker, or to make it, less bureaucratic?
Yeah, so take something like patch management. There is a process that you would go through in order to do patching. Mm-hmm. Right? The process should manage the patching. There are some bits of kit. There may be free downloads. There may be something as part of a broader management suite that you've got. But the point is, it's not just it's not something you just take out of a box and go. Obviously, patch. Like you say, it's these things are things that people are employed to do. Mm-hmm. So it's not just right tick. We've sorted that. It's like, go and sort your patch management out. There's more specifics than that. It's like, well, actually, there is no formal way of identifying what needs patching, when, who by, who's responsible, at what point does, I don't know, if you've got lots of sort of virtual machines in your environment, if they are not live or not in use, do they need patching? What happens if someone spins one up and it's not patched and it's not current? Does that represent a security or a potential security risk, and so on. So these things are actually quite, dare I say, dynamic, particularly when you've got things like virtualization in the mix. So it's not, these things are not to be taken lightly, and to assume that although it may take a couple of days to work out what the list is, it would be impractical to assume that this time next week we're going to fix them. Hence you've got this sort of medium-term view. And you've already said the word continuous improvement. That's what it's about. But this little process that is now sitting, looking at staring people in the face, that little process gets you to that list so that you can get on with your continual improvement process in the medium term. And you've got the right list. So it comes back to IT's about doing the right things. Here's the right list. That's essentially what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's almost then going into the business saying if we need to embark on a journey of patch management, the response may be, well, what got you there?
It's a pretty dull journey.
Oh, depends if you're a process kind of guy, But if you're going to the business saying, well, we need to really do patch management, well, what makes you say that? What sort of data or what decisions made you get there? Now, when we're doing this sort of strategy discussion, we talk about prioritization. And what I would do is work with my customers to say, if a qualified proposal, such as implementing a patch process, how does that impact your IT objectives? And I start to rank them on a sort of basis of 5 being significant, 3 being moderate, 1 being little to none. I start to really get a rank criteria as to how important patch management is against my IT objectives. And again, something that I see very rarely done with customers is that they very rarely go and rank projects against their core IT objectives. It goes back to Martin's point around the silo approach to management of IT, is that they may have an idea as to what they need to do in their role, and they may have a project that they say is very, very important to their role. But in the grand scheme of things, how does that impact IT objectives and corporate goals?
Is this something that an IT department can do itself, or do they need someone like you to come in from the outside?
The sort of feedback I've received from customers that having someone externally come in and really facilitate those discussions and give them direction, and if anything, I'd probably sort of retract that statement of redirection, which is really give my sort of field experiences to what I've seen with customers in the past, allows them to think about, well, we can try and embark on a very similar journey, that we're not alone here. We're all experiencing very similar sort of pain points. But, again, one of the sort of positive feedback received is that it really allowed the opportunity to get different teams in a room that very rarely happens, to really discuss about strategy and understand, as a group, who's going to be responsible for what and what those timelines look like.
If you don't mind me saying, you look quite young for someone who's got a lot of field experience. You don't have Martin's, authentic grizzled look.
Clean shaven this morning, well, if anything, my background really. So I've been in service management now for 4 years. 3 years as a consultant at Microsoft. I spent some time working for a large telecommunications company prior to that. But I have sort of gone through the ranks. Don't get me wrong. I initially started at Microsoft back in 2004 as a student intern. I then sort of went away. Somehow got interested in process during that year, and I went away back to university to complete my degree. I did some contracting and went into service management after I had graduated, and then came back into consulting in Microsoft at 2007. So
you actually have done it from the other end. You have suffered the pain.
Absolutely. I've been on the other end where I'm trying to implement a process and trying to get clarity as to what does the business want. So I've been there as well.
There's a really simple answer to your question, and that is that, yes, organisations could do this without any external input. But there's a follow-on question, which is, but would they? And the answer is, in most cases, probably not. And therefore, the question is, well, is it worth getting someone in to just initiate, and you use the word facilitate a lot, which is exactly what it is. There are, templates and sort of canned processes and all the rest of it. And it's about, all right, guys, we're going to go through these steps that you could have come up with on your own, but you probably wouldn't have because you're all too busy, doing other things. And that's what it boils down to.
Word in the question keep coming up. Well, it's not really a word. It's 4 letters. ITIL. Yes. Are we afraid to say the word? Are you afraid to say the word?
I'm certainly not afraid to say the word ITIL. Obviously my background is really around people and process. I'm really, very much trying to adhere to frameworks such as ITIL. Also use MOF, Microsoft Operations Framework, which is really built on the ITIL framework.
Let's back up for a second for a couple of people to say, they've started talking a foreign language all of a sudden. ITIL is?
The de facto standard for IT service management. It's really giving customers good practice as to how to manage their IT environment.
And that's really what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Here.
Yeah.
We aren't talking about ITIL specifically.
No.
The answer to some of the questions that are raised could be, let's take a look at ITIL and see if we can instill somebody else's, let's be clear about this, somebody else's idea of best practice for doing certain things. That's the key point here. Now, a lot of people use it, a lot of people don't use it, and we've talked to the reg readers about this a lot, and there's a threshold. It's usually a size of company thing below which the overhead associated with doing ITIL outweighs the benefits of doing ITIL.
And what sort of size threshold?
Good question. I wish I knew the answer to that. Can we just say
biggish?
No, medium. Medium.
Above medium.
Below medium.
Below medium.
Below medium. The benefits, the full benefits are in question. The ability to extract the full benefits are in question. I'm sure someone probably shout.
I can't help feeling a bit a little vague here. Below medium, the benefits are in question.
All right, I don't know the exact size,
yes.
but we've got that data point somewhere, and I'm going to remember to find it. However, below that sort of point where pure ITIL is actually a benefit to the larger organisation, what we have found is that this notion of spirit of ITIL. As in, well, that bit seems to suit us, we'll use that, and that bit seems to suit us. But it's not about going on the courses and getting all the textbooks and getting the accreditations and all that kind of thing. Funnily enough, we've just done a project with a help desk and service management software vendor, and they've got, I think, 50,000 customers worldwide. Anyone want to have a guess as to what percentage of their customers use ITIL?
I don't really know.
Just have a guess. Given that you've been putting me on the spot.
I'm just going to invent a number. 30. 20%?
1.
What?
Yeah, 1%. And the effort that the selling or the sell side community goes to incorporate ITIL or other standards, don't get me wrong, this is not about bashing ITIL, into their products to say, yeah, we're compliant and we support this and we support that. One of the bigger names in this field that sells software to help people do all this stuff we've been talking about, change and configuration management, 1% of their 50,000 global customers actually use ITIL. So that's not to say it's not good. It's just that it's something that we know the larger organisations get the most benefit from.
MOF popped up as well.
It did. So MOF being the Microsoft Operations Framework, it's really a lot of the feedback we've received is that we've embarked on this journey of ITIL, but really, what is the practical way of implementing ITIL? And really, MOF gives that descriptive guidance as to how you do that, really sort of based on maybe a Microsoft environment, or, regardless of what technology you're working on. But it sort of captures MSIT experience as well as ITIL good practice, and building on that to really formulate a lifecycle approach, very, very similar to ITIL.
It's similar. When would you use MOF and not ITIL, and when would you use ITIL and not MOF?
I think that's a decision for any customer to make, to be honest. I would never say, you should use ITIL, you should use MOF. Essentially, they're both frameworks. Essentially, working out what's best for your organisation to pick out from those frameworks.
Well, would it be fair to say that if you've got wall-to-wall Microsoft, then MOF might be, at least, you might recognise more of it?
Absolutely. I think, if that's the case, then really look at MOF, because it's really giving that descriptive guidance as to how to manage your Microsoft IT environment.
Mm-hmm. So the question, where does SOA fit into this? Sort of sideways.
Okay, yeah.
Really,
I always get this word wrong.
Tangentially.
That word.
Yeah.
So the principle of SOA is essentially about how you architect software from bits and pieces which ideally are reusable, and you think of them as discrete services, bring them together, and you have, let's say, more flexible, dynamic way of building and designing software applications. So from the point of view of better management, I would say that it is relevant because you should have a better grasp on the components that you are calling services to build into a service. At the same time, of course, if you're taking a sort of a ground-up component-based approach, there are more bits, perhaps, to manage. But the interesting thing is that whenever we ask the reg readers about what their priorities are in a given year, we do the barometer study roughly once a year or whatever it is, custom software development is always at the top. It's never going to go away. Everybody's bought lots of packaged software applications and all the rest of it, but they're still doing their own thing because there are things that need to be joined up. There are things that need to be created for specific use case requirements, etc., etc., etc. So I'm kind of glad that someone mentioned SOA, because there's a whole bunch of there's a whole clever school of thought out there that it's all dead.
A different starting point.
I think so.
Yeah. Simon just mentions what SMEs need is an ITIL light. So maybe that's something Freeform kind of Dynamics could come up with.
Yeah, we could spend 3 years coming up with that and start some training courses and all the rest of it.
I mean, it's not like it isn't your job. Or
so I would say one last thing around sort of using ITIL and MOF is that MOF resource is available for free. So all the life cycle, the documentation around role guidance is all available on the Microsoft.com/MOF website for free.
So they can just download some stuff from there.
They can download the manuals, understand what the core processes are, what the definition is, what that process looks like, who needs to be involved in that process. We've also released what we call reliability workbooks, where we sort of give guidance as to how to manage our core technologies, and we talk about how you could use implement standard changes based on our core technology. So it's really giving real descriptive guidance, and it's available for free, so it's a great resource.
Yeah, you said it was available for free. They don't need that. They've got this. It's the Atherton map.
The Atherton
made up.
Well, the point was that we've been talking about a bunch of things that actually hang together as a little informal process. But the point is there's some steps in it, and if you follow them, then you might actually get somewhere. Now, there's bottom right-hand side of that figure says DIY. And you came up with a cool stat which made me sort of hopefully appreciate that this isn't about trying to flog people more stuff. Yeah. And well, you go for it.
Yeah, so essentially, again, going back to the experience I had working with customers, developing these strategies, developing these roadmaps, around about 80% of the roadmaps we put in place, customers embark on that journey on their own. Really, they can, the project plans and the solutions that they're trying to go ahead and achieve, they can do on their own. Now, for me, the engagement itself is called an OSR, an Operations Strategic Review. For me, that engagement will always be a success if that customer can go away and remediate everything in that roadmap, regardless of whose involvement it has. Now, from a Microsoft point of view, we will drive that remediation forward from an account point of view, regardless if it has our involvement or doesn't have our involvement. So, again, 80% of our customers embarking out the journey on their own. It's quite a powerful thing, but it's really 3 days of clarity and of planning.
So you go in for 3 days, you go home, they get on with it.
I personally would walk away from that customer, depending on the outputs of that roadmap. It may have my involvement to come back in.
Other people might come in.
Well, from an account point of view, again, it's not something that we would do a piece of work and say, here's your roadmap, goodbye. From an account management point of view, they would then state everything in that roadmap and put into their service delivery plan to make sure that everything in that roadmap's remediated or indeed kept on track. So we try to manage it from an end-to-end point of view.
Okay, great. Now, we've got a little self-diagnosis tool here so that you can see where you are. Are you good? Are you bad? Are you in between?
Yeah, we thought we'd come up with this because, like, well, hang on a minute. You spend your time talking to customers. We all spend our time talking to customers.
I don't talk to customers.
The real world stuff, and we thought, well, let's use the last two slides just to sort of call out some differences and perhaps some things that will. We've said, hey, get a simple process. Here's a simple process. Here are some things that people might recognise.
Yeah.
And help them actually start filling in some of those boxes. So we sort of split the world into IT shops or businesses that are, if you like, good or know about processes. That's what they do. Or businesses or IT shops that are sort of real techies and that's the sort of focus.
So what are we saying they're good at and not so good at? Good at the top. Did we say they're good at and not so good at?
Yeah. So we've typically found that. Organisations that are, if you like, good at process are good at these things, and they are not so good at these things. And therefore, this is simply a very simple, I think self-diagnosis tool is probably a little bit overblowing it slightly, but hopefully there's some things in here that people might recognise.
It's more from field experience,
yeah.
really.
Yes.
It's more sort of saying, well, what have we seen?
I was waiting for you to say.
What are we seeing with our customers? And really, what are they good at? If they seem to be good at process, what is it around? What are the particular processes that they're good at? It tends to be your incident management, your change management, your service level management, and also they're quite good at documentation, where they seem to be not as good as that is really highlighting the success. And if anything, I might even put that term into IT-savvy customers, that, really, how much does IT demonstrate their successes and show the value that they bring to the organisation? Perception of IT, how do they measure that satisfaction is sometimes always varied. That, if a caller rings the service desk and they can't get through, that then states that their IT is bad. There's a lot more to IT than just the service desk and calling to log an issue.
Mm-hmm. But it does have a very strong,
absolutely,
very strong impact
These
on
the kind of
perception
symptoms
of IT.
that you can pull
Yeah,
out.
so it's less about the hey, everyone's we're good at these things. It's more a case of, well, in Naresh's field experience, what he finds is different types of organisations are not so good at these things, and those are the areas to actually be focusing on. Pat yourself on the back for the other ones. But the idea of IT doing a bit of sort of self-marketing and self-promotion, I think, is a great one, because who else is going to do it? Yeah. Otherwise, it can be that sort of taken for granted thing, and when it's great, it's just taken for granted, and when it's not great, it's hated.
How do you go about that, though?
Not many organisations that we've spoken to have somebody specifically tasked with being the guy in the middle that appreciates A, what they're trying to do, IT guys, and sort of B, what the business wants them to do, and is able to sort of have what's the word that we've been using quite a lot? Facilitate, though, that sort of understanding and that kind of progress. So you can come up with these lists, and sometimes you do need external help for that. But we've found that where that role does exist, and it doesn't really have a name, to be honest. It could be the IT business liaison guy, whatever. It doesn't really have a name. But in the few instances where that role does exist in organisations, there is a much better appreciation and understanding of what IT does for the business, and perhaps a better sort of ultimately, IT is seen more as a, let's say, strategic partner, as opposed to a cost centre and something that's just hit every now and again or has money taken away from it, that kind of thing. So that is not a common thing, but where it does exist, it's actually quite a positive thing.
Yeah, and I think IT have really got to focus on having presence in the organisations. When I meet with customers the first time, I start to understand how they promote themselves. So I say, well, when you have a new starter coming into your organisation, how do they find out about IT? How do I know what are the key numbers I need to call if I have an issue? And it's almost as if, well, simple little quick things that, have embedded information within your email signatures. Start to have, mouse mats, simple little things. Have, as part of your standard build on the desktop, the key numbers for the IT service desk, self-promotion. In terms of key presence, it's having that intranet. The amount of times I've worked with customers who say to me, yeah, we have an intranet, but no one really owns it. It hasn't been updated for a number of years now. It says, well, you are the face of IT. surely you guys need to be thinking about how we promote ourselves and having the top 10 top 10 questions, that frequently asked questions and quick wins and resources that they can use for online learning, and sort of saying, well, IT are here and we're adding value.
Well, here's a great example. I mean, this IT shop may be world-leading in terms of its appreciation and ability to harness IT, yet this is a generalisation, but it's one of the things you've found. Maybe they're rubbish at documentation, and therefore the things that they do are not repeatable, they're not sustainable. Somebody couldn't pick them up and explain them to a business guy that says, hey, what is this thing? You're asking for more money, justify it. Da, 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 da. So there's a pretty simple example.
Because you're starting from zero because you haven't documented that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever that might be, it might be a way of just changing something or a process or whatever.
Okay, that's great. Let's move on to the last one, because that really sums up what we've been talking about. Whilst you're preparing your comments on that, we do have a couple of questions from people just saying, really, what size is the threshold for ITIL now? Martin's fudged it, so I'm going to have to go to you on this one, Naresh. What if you're below a certain size? Where does ITIL not really work?
I actually think that ITIL and MOF can be applicable to any environment, any customer. It's not about adopting every single process of ITIL and MOF. It's going back to working out what is best for your organisation. There may be parts of service transition or the deliver phase of MOF that really works well for my organisation. I can actually make that applicable to my organisation. It's not sort of, well, we're only a small council, therefore I can't embark on the whole journey of ITIL.
So it's not like an ISO thing. You don't have to swallow it whole.
Well, it's not a standard. It's a framework.
Yeah. Look, I'll say this live, so it means that I'll try and make it happen. We'll go away and look at the data, and I'll stick an article on the reg if Phil will let me talking about that threshold, because it's interesting, but it shouldn't be taken as read. Do you know what I mean? But if you've got an IT shop of 5 people and you send 3 of them on a course, that doesn't make sense. Do you know what I mean? So there are limits to this. There's a scale, but if we can point as to where we've found out, actually from the reg readers, where it makes most sense to stop and start, then sure, I'll go away and find.
Okay, that'll be handy. That's a good offer. We'll take you up on that.
All right.
Okay, 3 minutes on the end here, just to sum up.
This is what you were adamant we should finish with. I wanted to include a whole bunch of them. However, this is the one that is a make or break.
I like one rather than a bunch.
Yeah, for me, it's core. It's everything that we do around continuous service improvement, whether we embark on this journey of creating a strategy in place without senior buy-in and management commitment to go ahead and do these things. There's no point in even starting that journey. Mm-hmm. How do we go about achieving that? And I always give a good example as to I worked with a large company last year where they were trying to embark on this journey of implementing process, and really how did they articulate the value of process to the business. And really what we did was we got senior business leaders in the room alongside IT guys, and what we did was we built a real-life simulation based on operating an airport. So I would really put senior business leaders into a role such as the service desk, or indeed working as an engineer, and really the whole emphasis around making money. So they understood that part. But it really was how do we make money by using process, and how does understanding the right level of detail we need to manage an airport, and how the sort of pains and challenges IT face to do that when you're getting requirements from the business to make lots of money. And it does bring up some interesting surprise, and then by doing that, the business gets an appreciation as to what sort of value process can bring, and it sort of gives them the go-ahead to go and do that.
Mm-hmm. Martin, these points make sense to you?
Yeah, they do. Business guys understand process. They understand services because that's what businesses, that's what they run on. The translation of that into what IT does for the business may or may not be understood or appreciated. And there are companies out there, I can't remember their name, but they have a very neat methodology for making sure that executive buy-in is not just in name or a gesture, because you can go, I fully support this initiative and not have the faintest idea what that initiative is, which is kind of appropriate given it's election
it's
day.
It's easier to support them sometimes on that basis.
Exactly. Yeah. So if there's a way of putting somebody in somebody's shoes, albeit for a short space of time, just to get them to appreciate the point, fantastic, because they've at least lived it a little bit, and it's probably something to tell their colleagues, actually, you know what, those guys, it's a nightmare, and that there is a better way of doing it, and it's going to have these benefits for us. So so I think that's kind of cool. I like the airport analogy. Doesn't have to be the airport, of course, but there you go.
Okay, guys, we have to wrap up there. We run out of time, but that's you know, we've covered quite a lot, and hopefully we've covered your questions, and we've also got the promise of some follow-up from Martin on that.
I'll do that.
You promise it, and then it happens live.
I hope we've got that data now.
If you haven't, make it up. That's what they do. Thank you very much for tuning in. We hope that's been useful for you. Give us your feedback, because remember, it's election day today, and I can't promise that there won't be some very difficult decisions for you to make in the future, but you know that it's the Register that cares about your welfare. Thank you to Naresh and Martin, and I've been Tim Phillips. We'll join us, please, next time for the next Regcast. Thank you very much. Goodbye.